maximum exposure is based on an average and not a peak, which is really, really good, because if it was a peak, then you would be much more restricted on where you can and how much power you could run. This has to do with the duty cycle of your emission, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Remember that the duty cycle on any given frequency is the time that you're transmitting over the total time the radio is on. So if you're transmitting, if your radio is on at a frequency for an hour and you're transmitting for 30 minutes, that duty cycle will be 50% as an example. Okay, when you go to the website, ARI website, and you put in RF compliance, this is the page that will pop up, and it reads RF exposure calculator separated by dashes. It's a long page, 2 pages. We'll come back to this. This is just the first page. And on this page, right here, it has the word watts. This is where you plug your watts in. It talks about duty cycle, and then the second part of the page, this is where the numbers that you will copy down populate, and this tells where you can go get this information from this bulletin 65. So back to the top part, right here, and it says need help with this, and you will click that. That throws you to another page that's even longer, and it's 3 screens. You know, and you'll have to scroll. What this does is it talks about the duty cycle, and it gives you some examples of duty cycle. Then, in the middle part of the page, it has to do the effects of ground, controlled and uncontrolled, and gain instructions. And it starts the actual antenna gain numbers that you'll need. So you look up your antenna, and it will tell you what gain to use. And it will tell you if you don't have a complying, if their antenna's not listed, you may have further troubles. You may have to look elsewhere. Okay. And there's some notes. Make sure you read the notes, because if you don't match up here, it'll tell you where to go. Back to the top of that same page, there's a little box right here that says, here's an excellent coax calculator. If you do not want to do that, or if you don't find your coax, then don't take any coax loss. You can use the full power of your transmitter. You're crazy if you do, because this gives you, we don't have a perfect chain anywhere where if you put in 100 watts from your radio, you're going to get 100 watts out. This gives you an opportunity to reduce that, which is going to help you in your distances. This screen will pop up, and it lists a bunch of coax types. This field, none of these fields will be populated, except this is a drop-down box. When you click that drop-down box, all of these options show up. You pick the one you want, the one that you want, the one that you have, for each coax type and length. And I just fill this out randomly just to get some numbers generated to show you. So I just put in 65, and remember, make sure you pick feet and not meters, or you're going to have a wildly different answer. Pick the middle of the band, your SWR, and the power in, and you push the calculate button, and right there you'll get a wattage. That 88, I put 100, if I had this set up and put that in, I'd get 88 watts out. So back to the first screen. Sorry about that. This is where you put the 88 watts in. This drop-down box, you pick your duty cycle, and it tells you, here it calculates it. This is where you put your antenna gain from that one page. This is where you put your operating frequency in. And leave this checked. This says include the effects of ground. I don't know what that means. I'm not Bill, but it said if you want the conservative, pick that. So that's what I picked. And then at the bottom of that page, it says calculate. And these numbers will populate. Now, the important part of this, you cannot control the maximum allowed power density. Remember that first screen that had the dip? That's the power density. You can't control that. That's already built into all those parameters. But what you can pick is right here and right here. This is for a controlled environment. That's you and your family that knows it. It says the minimum distance in feet and meters. This is for uncontrolled environment. Same thing. The minimum compliance distance in feet and meters. So you run this number. It says 28 feet. You go out to your antenna and it's 25 feet away. You have to move your antenna or change your chain so that you get at least that distance. If you go out there and it's 30 feet, you're good to go. Print the documentation. This is what mine looks like. You can print it any way that makes sense to you. Put it in your notebook, your log, your station log. Make sure that your antenna exceeds that minimum distance and that the public can't get into that area. I did an erroneous calculation just for the heck of it. I put in 10,000 watts and the number comes up so huge that now I understand why AM stations have this gigantic fence around, because they don't want you walking there and melting your Hershey bar in your pocket. You must do these calculations for all the combinations that you have. And it could be, I think I had, at the time, I had an in-fed half wave, an off-center fed dipole, and a quarter wave vertical. I used all the ham bands, and I picked the middle of where the general band starts. And so I wound up with, looks like about 25 calculations that I wrote the numbers down. And in it I have the minimum feet for each of those combinations. If you add an amplifier, you change things, and you got to go through the chain that affects. The form and format is you're choosing. You will probably never be asked, kind of your question, you will probably never be asked. Better safe than sorry, because sooner or later your neighbor may say that your antenna out there gave them cancer. And you can go to FCC and say, first of all, ionizing radiation is not radio coming from radios. There's not enough power to generate that kind of problem. But even if it were, you're in compliance. So better safe than sorry. Rabbit hole number 2, if you so choose, at the very bottom of that very first screen, there's a little spot right in there that says the Radio Society of Great Britain also has a website, and you can go to that, and there's a little spot right there that says, that's a link that says there's a web app available, and God help you, this little cool little chart comes up. It takes a while to wade through it if you want to. I don't see any point in it, but you can put, some of these have drop-down boxes and others are hard-coded. Eventually, you will get to the part where you'll click it and you'll get some compliance numbers, but it's all in meters, and it's stuff that just, it's available, but for me, pretty much unusable. You get this cute little picture that tells how far away you have to be, and from the top and from the side of the antenna. And that's all. If you have a question,